Can police legally hold your door open? And if they do, what can you do about it? What happens if the police show up at your front door and you make the mistake of opening the door and you start talking? But then you realize you made a huge mistake and you're ready to retreat back into your house. What if you start to shut the door? Can the police grab the door, or can they shove their foot in the door in order to continue their investigation? I want to show you how this usually goes down if the police come to your front door. Cops show up at your front door and they start asking all kinds of questions. And here's the problem. If you actually open the front door, they're going to do everything they can to get you outside so that they can detain you for further investigation. In fact, it's usually the innocent, unsuspecting citizen that is most at risk in this situation. I mean, the police are there to help you, right? I mean, you're supposed to be able to trust the police when they come to your door, right? Not if they already believe you are the prime suspect and they already believe you've done something wrong. In fact, I see this happen all the time with neighbor talk. Some neighbor will call on you and say you've done something they don't like, and now all of a sudden a cop's at your front door wanting to essentially interrogate you about hearsay from some nearby neighbor. If the so-called victim is upset enough and they provide just enough evidence to establish probable cause for the officer to believe what they said, now you're going to have an officer coming not to ask your side of the story, but to interrogate you about this information in order to determine that you are their prime suspect. I have to remind people, cops are human too. They have a tendency to have a bias based upon whoever story they hear first, and then they go ahead and label people. They'll label the person who talked first, the victim, and then they're going to label you because you didn't talk first, the suspect, and now they're coming towards you. So what do? First of all, there is no reason for you to open that door. And I'll tell you why. If you open your primary front door or even your screen door, cops have a tendency to grab that door, and now you lose control over the entire situation. In fact, many times this can be a police technique that they are trained to use in order to grab a hold of the door, continue conversation with you, with their primary goal, get you to step outside. As a general rule, do not go outside. This is the number one thing that the police are trained to do if they come to your front door. In fact, think about it. The moment you step outside, you lose control over the situation, and now the officer is completely in control. At this point, officers can use anything that you say, even your body language, even the things you don't say, they can use them against you to establish maybe a reason to detain you or to make them believe they are starting to experience some concern about their officer safety. I have seen people over and over again that have done nothing wrong step outside of their house, and they end up getting arrested for resisting arrest or detention charges for exactly this situation. Why? Because here's how it goes down. Let's say you step outside, and now the cops, maybe you got one in front of you and one around the side of you, and you start feeling a little uncomfortable, like, why are they surrounding me here and circling me? What's going on here? Well, what do the officers do? Hey man, what are you doing? Are you moving around? Why are you being shifty here? I tell you what, why don't you put your hands behind your back? I'm going to detain you for a second. Well, what happens? Number one, you start getting a little nervous and scared, like, are they about to do something to me? But then also you know that your rights are being violated. So maybe you raise your voice just a little bit, or maybe you start to pull away for just a second. That is all the cops need in order at that point to claim that they have concerns for their officer safety, and now they're going to grab you. In fact, it's exactly this situation where many cops, particularly if they're really zealous about what they do and they're a little aggressive, they'll grab someone and throw them down to the ground. I've seen people go face first into the pavement because now the cops are so concerned about their safety, they're going to make sure and detain you, even if it's super aggressive. Look, I know for many people, it's really difficult to resist the temptation to step outside. The officer's talking to you and you know, I've not done anything wrong. I want to seem like I'm cooperative with the police officer, but I'm also a little concerned about what happens if I walk outside. You have got to resist these temptations of feeling this way because the officer is looking to play on these exact feelings to get you to step outside so that he's in control of the situation. In fact, I've seen cops use language to play on this feeling over and over again. They'll say things like, "No problem, ma'am. If you'll just step outside for a second, I'm just have a few questions for you and I'll be on my way." Or, "No problem, I'm just here to have a friendly conversation. I'll only take just a few minutes of your time." But even if you resist stepping outside, Can you close the door if the officer has his hand on it? Be careful here. I've seen officers claim that they experienced pain or they feel like you were being aggressive towards them, and now they use that as a basis to detain you aggressively because of officer safety concerns. Or even worst case scenario, they can claim that they think that you aggressively and intentionally meant to hurt them when they experienced pain on their hand, and now they charge you with a felony assault of a public servant charge because of this. Instead, if the officer continues to hold the door open or has his foot in your door, step back into your home, let the officer know that you do not consent to him entering the home or any search of your residence, your person, or your place, and then make it very clear you are exercising your right to remain silent and will not cooperate moving further, and then close your mouth. By remaining inside your home and exercising your constitutional rights, you are forcing this officer to come up with a legal basis to do anything further. And it's going to be very difficult for him to do it at this point. And you may say, why? Because here's the deal. When the officer showed up at your front door, he either had enough probable cause to be able to come in, he either had a search warrant or he had an arrest warrant, or he saw something in plain view or exigent circumstances that would have allowed him to be able to come into your house already, or he didn't. The last thing you need to do is to give him any reasons to allow him to come in and do a search or to put you down on the ground. So the fact that you exercise your right to remain silent and you exercise your right to absolutely prohibit him from searching your home, now you've put the ball back in his court and you've protected yourself. So what's the best course of action? What's the best way to protect yourself from cops coming to your front door and doing this to you? I know this may sound really dumb or common sense, but buy a Ring camera. Put that on the front of your house or just install an old-fashioned peephole. This allows you to be able to see exactly what's going on and whoever is at your front door before you go to the front door. Here's the problem. Many people have trained themselves that anytime they hear a doorbell or a knock at their front door, they just go and they answer the door and they don't even think about what they're doing. I've seen this happen a lot where kids will run to the front door to answer the door. A cop will be standing there, and then because the child will move back a little bit, you'll see an officer just start walking right inside the house. This is why it's really important that not only are you aware of what your rights are, but train your kids on what their rights are as well. We don't let strangers or police officers just walk into our house. By having a Ring camera or a peephole on your front door, you can see who is there and you can absolutely ignore the cops completely, and you do not have to answer your front door unless the police have a search warrant. If they do have a valid search warrant, now is the time where you're going to ask them to be able to see a copy of that search warrant. You have a right to be able to see a copy of the search warrant before you open that front door. You can ask them to slip it under the door, review it, make sure it's signed by a judge. Because if you don't open the door at this point, they can take your door down. Even then, if they do have a valid search warrant, the moment you open the door, you let the officer know, I do not consent to a search of my person, my place, or any of my things that is not expressly provided for under this search warrant. And then you exercise your right to remain silent and keep your mouth shut. Why? You are limiting their legal ability to be able to search any and everywhere that they want to. Plus, you're making it clear you don't consent to anything beyond the scope of that warrant, and now you can hold them responsible if they come and they tear up everything else in your house and they didn't have a legal basis to do so. And oh, by the way, if you also tell them that you're going to exercise your right to remain silent, now they cannot take the things that you do or don't say or your body language and use that demeanor against you in court if you end up having a case that goes to trial. Here's another similar situation that happens if you get pulled over for a traffic stop. Let's say a cop pulls you over and now you're on the side of the road and you start to maybe roll down your window and the officer maybe even asks you to open the door. I've seen this happen where you maybe start to open the door and the cop grabs the door so you can't close it. But the more common situation that I have seen is where you roll down your window, and then the officer puts his hand right over the top of your door so that you cannot roll your window up. Well, how do you respond? Let's first start by asking the question I've had many of my viewers ask. Well, if a cop does this, can I just roll up my window so that way he doesn't have control over this situation anymore? This is a super risky move, and I'll tell you why. If you look to start rolling up your window when he has his hand on your window, be aware that this officer will likely see that as some type of move of aggression. And the really crazy officers, I've seen them actually try to claim that somehow that hurt their hand, and now they think you did that intentionally, and they'll use that as a reason to force you out of the car and potentially arrest you or detain you for some type of crime like assault of a public servant. I've also seen officers use exactly this situation as a basis to claim that they were concerned based upon officer safety. The worst part about this, under the Supreme Court case Pennsylvania versus Mims, the Supreme Court has said that the officer can force a driver out of the car if it's for a reasonable basis of officer safety. And then there's also a complementary case that says Maryland versus Wilson says that they can also force the passenger out of their side of the car for officer safety reasons as well. You may be asking, how is this possible that the Supreme Court would allow that to happen? Here's the reality of it. The Supreme Court stated that you being forced to get out of your car for officer safety reasons was minimally intrusive to your rights. The point? Be careful deciding you're going to roll up your window or slam your door shut when the officer has his hand on there, because he could use that as a basis to believe you're being aggressive, force you out of the car, possibly arrest you, and escalate the situation. So what do you do if a cop pulls you over? Look, I want to remind you, you do not have to roll your window all the way down. You can crack your window some and still be able to talk directly with the police officer. But be careful when you choose not to roll it all the way down, because here's a trick I've seen police officers do all the time. If you happen to have tinted windows, I've seen cops claim, no, I can't see through this window. I'm concerned for my officer's safety. And they use that as a pretextual reason to force you out of your car, which will then lead to a pat down of your body, your person, and potentially even more than that based upon them claiming they're in fear for their safety. I've even seen some ridiculous examples of cops claiming that you refusing to roll your window all the way down was actually some form of passive resistance, which is the craziest thing I've ever seen, because there is no such thing as passive resistance because you didn't roll down your window. You're not resisting the officer. Look, I know what you're thinking, because I have everybody say this on the comments and everything else. Jeff, you don't have to roll your window down. Let's be clear. Most of the time, you absolutely do not have to roll your window down like that, all the way down. You do have to roll it down some. Leaving it up, I've seen officers use that as a reason to then break the window. But I do want you to understand, cops are not going to like it. Things are going to escalate very quickly if you leave that window up most of the way. Let's be clear. If you don't roll the window down most of the way, the cops are not going to be happy. As an example, check out this video.
Sir, how's it going today? Bring it down for a second, please.
I can hear you just fine.
Want me to get you out of the car?
Do I need to get out of the car? Am I free to go?
Not yet.
Am I being detained?
Sir, you can make it easy on yourself or hard on yourself here, okay?
Do you suspect me of committing a crime?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
Yep. No? All right. All right, sir.
Yeah, you're
Now look, the officer may demand that you roll your window all the way down. You are not legally required to roll your window all the way down, but you do need to roll it down enough so that the officer is able to receive your driver's license and your insurance. And if you do have tinted windows, get ready. You're going to have an officer getting aggressive with you. So after you hand the officer your driver's license and your insurance, be polite, remain quiet, don't offer information, and only be extremely careful about what you say and how much interaction you have with the officer. And if you choose not to roll down your window at all, this is the one that I get people ask questions about under Pennsylvania versus Mims. You can say what you want, that I don't have to roll down my window, but this is where officers will use this as a pretext and say, because this guy won't roll down his window, I am in fear for my safety, and under officer safety, he is now going to force you out of the car. And this is where I have seen officers literally break the glass on that window in order to force you out of your car if you don't roll down the window. Now, when does this really actually happen? The reality of it is cops usually do this because they don't like somebody's attitude or the way that they're being spoken to. I very rarely see this when someone's being polite and they're not causing any issues and they roll their window down some. But if they don't like your attitude or their demeanor, you can guarantee they're going to use every one of these tricks in the book, every standard that's provided under officer safety as a basis to be able to get you out of your car. In fact, one of the other things that I see officers do quite frequently is that they will say that because you didn't roll down your window and it appears that you moved a little quickly back and forth, or the way that you were reaching under your seat, They're going to claim furtive movements. They thought you might have been reaching for a gun, or maybe you were reaching for a weapon. And now they're going to use it as a basis to break that window. And I've literally seen cops pull people out of the window, through the window, in a situation like that. Okay, so now let's say you're being held on the side of the road. Look, at some point, if you're sitting there for an extended period of time and he's already written you the ticket, or maybe he's not giving you the ticket at all, you need to ask the officer, am I free to go? At this point, you're making it very clear to the officer you are no longer involved in some type of consensual encounter with the police officer. You're ready to leave. And this is important so it will prepare your lawyer if for some reason you end up being charged. You're making it clear you did not consent, and your lawyer can argue that you were being illegally detained beyond the period reasonable for the traffic stop, and that will help your lawyer be able to potentially get your case thrown out. But even if you do everything right with the cops on the side of the road or at your house, what do you do if they show up demanding to see your guns? Do you have to answer their questions? Do you have to show them your guns? Check out this video where I give you a step-by-step guide on exactly what to say to the officers if they demand to see your guns. See you over there.